So I'm gonna so my routine. You get me started. Perfect. Yeah, this is great.
Last one die. Yes.
Finishing up my cardio. You're over with them. 3 weeks.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning.
Morning.
How's everybody doing? Good. I just want to say one thing for the group that was in here earlier with Rick. I hope you guys, actually I'll say this to everybody, I hope you guys understand everything that Rick's doing to help you guys out, to improve your abilities. Everybody should take advantage of it. There isn't a right answer for every situation. There are multiple options and solutions that exist. So they come in the morning and practice, and these things these are great. So I want to just start off by sharing one thing first, and then build upon it. So I want you to watch something. Who knows who this is?
Michael Phelps, isn't it?
Michael Phelps. Okay. This was just when he was a mediocre Olympian. He only had 10 gold medals. Hadn't achieved very much. This is 2008, so he's, no one really had heard of him. He was striving for his 11th gold medal, I believe. I want you to watch this real quick. I'm going to just get to the race portion. It makes us all. It makes a big difference on. Right, turn the light back on real quick. Sure. Sorry.
Where did you get it from?
Back. The other option that was there, they actually had Bob Costas narrating, so he was given the play-by-play, so it makes a big difference. But how many of you are Olympic coaches in swimming? So George, I'm sure. Just sure you probably are. I mean, it's like a lead brick in the water. That's probably true. That's why I'm not. So the key part about it is, none of us are here to be able to critique how he was doing, but does anybody know anything about this particular race?
It's difficult.
It's difficult,
Yeah.
Okay?
Most difficult stroke.
Okay? If you,
I swam in the military, and fly is very, very difficult. In fact, I've never really mastered it.
okay?
It's pretty difficult.
From what little amount that you could see, did Mike, we're so close. Just, Mike and I. So, did it look like he was in control?
Yes.
Okay? Did it look like there was anything that was rattling him? I mean, like, I know it was a quick preview. Did it look like he was in stride? Did the race for him get better as he was moving along?
Yeah.
I mean, if you notice, there's basically 2 times to go there and back, so a total of 4 lengths that they're going to go. The first 2, 3 lengths, relatively close with everybody, right? And then on the last length, he kicks it in gear, and everyone else starts dwindling off, right? So really kind of drove forward at the end, right?
Looked like he didn't even allow himself to get high over his wind.
Okay?
He stayed even.
One thing you didn't see on this one is at the very end, I mean, you saw him take his hat off, but he took his goggles and his hat and just threw them on the side.
Stay focused.
I'm going to turn this thing off. So you might be thinking, why am I bringing this up? Well, I was just at a conference in Chicago, the NAR conference this last week, and we had the opportunity of Michael Phelps speaking to us. So that's why it's on my mind. This particular race, you can't tell there, nobody knew afterwards, right when he dove in the water, his goggles kind of fell off and he started getting water in his goggles.
Oh, wow.
Every single time as he's come back, his goggles were filling up the entire time. The last length, they were completely full. He couldn't see. Did it look like he couldn't see?
I knew exactly what was going on.
He knew exactly what he was doing, exactly where he was going, and moving forward. They asked him on stage, what are some things that he has done to put him in those types of situations. Talked about visualizing. He'd run that race before, over and over and over in his head. He knew exactly how many strides, how many breaths he had to take, when he had to take the breath. He knew exactly how many arms, when to rotate. So the key part about it is there's 3 questions that he was asked on how to prepare for. And this is kind of where I went directing with it. He was not only preparing on visualization, but he was prepared what to expect, what not to expect, and what don't you want to have happen. So I asked the question, this also tails in with prospecting. When we get on the phone, do we know what to expect?
Yes.
Okay, I'm seeing some nods, some yeses, some no's, some maybe uncertainty. Do we know what not to expect? That's where we may be unprepared. Is it possible we're going to hear questions that I should say objections that we've never heard before?
No.
It's possible, but I think that by this time it's probably not likely. We probably have a good idea what the objections are going to be when they're on the phone, right? So are we prepared when we hear those objections? That's why I was talking about earlier, the practice that they were doing in the morning. These objections, when you're going over them in your head, how well do you know the objections so when you get it and you're put in that situation that you can actually respond to it? Do we know not only things that we don't want to have happen? Are we prepared if that happens?
Good point about the goggles, because the goggles is a great representation of being versatile. When something happens that's a little bit out of the ordinary, you have to adjust to it. And you don't know what personality you're going to get when that phone rings or when you knock on that door. Being able to adjust to that moment is no different than them goggles filling up with water.
Great. Very well. Helen Keller actually was asked, what's worse, to be blind or to have sight with no vision?
Wow.
It's an interesting thought. Is it worse to be blind or to have sight with no vision? Kind of a different perspective. So the question I have, are there certain objections that you are concerned about every single day? Oh, I hope they don't ask me this. I hope I don't get asked that. Or have you thought of things that could come up that you may not be ready for? And I just don't want to handle that one. I'm going to avoid that one, so I'm going to walk away from it. Versus thinking about what could happen, writing it down, coming in the morning, whether it be the meeting before here, talk to your peers. How do I handle this objection? Be prepared for it so that if something like that happens, are your goggles going to just fall off and the race is over? Or are you able to move forward as if nothing happened? When you're walking, I've watched that several times since hearing the speech. You cannot, maybe there's other versions where you got close-ups of them. You cannot tell at all what has happened in that whole race. You can afterwards, he's frustrated. The version I wanted to have you listen to, they have the commentators, and they were trying to speculate at the time, what was it why is he so upset? They said, I think he's upset because he had a goal at a time of 151 something, whatever it was, and he didn't hit that goal. He's probably upset that he didn't hit that goal. When he first takes the goggles off, and then you start seeing him kind of going like this. At first, he couldn't even see the time. He was trying to have a tough time even knowing whether or not he broke something. He's kind of trying to see exactly where it was. So he's kind of a little bit of a haze.
Did he know he won?
He did, but it took him. He found it. He knew that, but just didn't know he broke the world record. So there's a little bit of a haze there. And then afterwards, you can tell when he was, the entire time he was focused on it. But it was the fact that he was so prepared. One thing that his coaches taught at an early age that I thought was exceptional, that when he first started working with his coach, one of the first things that they worked on is removing can't from his vocabulary. I can't do this. So, of course, it was tough earlier on. It would become, we're typically our worst enemies, and we might attack ourselves, but removing the word I can't from our vocabulary took him from a perspective of being able to focus on one thing and move down the chain. And we talk about things that are possible. So based on that, I want to talk about a couple of things when you're prospecting, whether you're working with a buyer or seller. When we were working with sellers or with buyers, I had one goal first depending on who I was working with, the goal was still the same. So, and I want to, there is no right or wrong answer. I can just tell you what my answer was, what my goal was. So when you're working with a seller, starting out that, when you're prospecting for a listing, let's be more specific. When you're prospecting for a listing, what is your primary goal? Okay? Anybody different?
Sell a house.
Okay, so it's your end goal. Okay? Sounds like everyone's right on the first one. These are the goals, right? That's what you basically have, apparently? Okay? What about if you're working with a buyer? Okay? How do you do that? Is it the same? Okay, what's different?
You have to entice them in different ways when they're buying, because they just want place, not necessarily bottom line kind of stuff. They just want different things.
Okay? This was my goal. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I guess for me, what's most important about setting an appointment with the buyer, more than anything, is just to set the expectation. So like
Okay.
when a buyer is adamant, like, no, let's just go see these homes, I'm pretty sure I want it, it's like, that's fine, we have to basically meet first. I mean, it's just, I have to have that appointment so they know this is where I like, and that's just cut down for me. But more so than anything, within the appointment is very important because that's where I set expectations with them.
Okay? I'm going to feed into that. So, for the seller, this is exactly what my goal was. Very simple. You're on the phone when you're typically when you're prospecting with them. My goal is to set an appointment. Now, with feeding off with what Liz is going to talk about, it wasn't just set an appointment. My goal was to set a qualified appointment. Now, we would have these competitions when George and I would be standing next to each other prospecting, where we would set an appointment, and then at the time, sometimes we'd cancel the same appointment that we set before we got off the phone, because they weren't going to be a qualified appointment. What do I mean by qualified appointment?
They're motivated, their price is correct, they're not thinking out there in the booths.
Okay,
Really well.
it's about finding out exactly where they stand. Are they realistic?
Yeah.
We talk about the words.
Their
Everybody on
situation.
titles there.
Okay, I guess that's a very. Everyone hear what he said? Eddie, we said that all of the decision makers are going to be present. Do you think that's an important question you ask? Hey, when I come out, will all the people that need to be there that are involved in the decision, are they going to be present? It's a very good question. Right,
3 out of 4 with camp.
3 and 4 camp.
CAMP.
Okay. So, one specific question at the tail end of your pre-qual, it's vital, was one thing that was asked. Any idea what that question might be?
Would you sign with me?
Do you want to
Close.
Do you want to sell it on? You want to list your own?
Yeah, there's a lot of questions that are coming. These are all great questions. I can tell you that one question, if you haven't used this, I would highly encourage you to do it. It's a close, but it's going to determine whether or not you're going to get out there. If what I say makes sense, and you feel comfortable and confident that I can help you sell your house, are you prepared to work with me or sign paperwork when we come out? If they say no, you're not done. Your vision, now you're going to go back, you're going to have to handle the objection. I'm confused. Help me understand. What is it? You're going to go back to the same find out questions that you had to go before. But if they say yes, great. That's a great qualified appointment. That's when, if you're visualizing everything that's going forward. When I was on the phone, those were it. Of course, I wanted to set an appointment. Are they willing to meet with it? Yes. Okay, great. Now I go into the qualified, the pre-qual, to see if they're there. That's one of the key questions I would ask before I go out on an appointment. Okay? Working with a buyer. Setting an appointment is true, but I'm going to be a little more specific. What type of an appointment?
Pre-approval.
Pre-approved? Okay. How do you know they're pre-approved?
Sent to the lender. I wouldn't even work with them if they don't have the lender pre-approval, and on top of it, they
So
need
have
to-
you met him at this point?
No.
Or just on the phone?
Yep.
Okay.
So send it to the lender.
So you're going to send him to someone you haven't met. You haven't met the person yet. You're going to send him to the lender. I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm just, okay?
Yeah, very similar. When the minute they call me and say they're interested in a home, or I talk to them, they're interested in a home, I say, great, we're going to meet this day. And before that, I mean, we're going to meet this day here. So-and-so is going to call you at this time. When's a good time? Get you all set up. So that way, and if they don't, and usually that, I mean, I don't know, 9 out of 10 times they do end up talking to a lender and getting pre-approved.
Okay.
Or at
You
least
know?
talking to them.
I have to paint a picture that they want to get pre-approved and they want to be homes.
Okay.
And if they don't have that vision, then they're not gonna go for it, because it's difficult when you just talk to someone, and now you have to send them over to pre-qual, and you have to build a lot of rapport, because they're giving sensitive information, telling you sensitive information. So they have to trust you enough to do that.
Of all the buyers you guys have worked with, ones that they're not a referral, ones that you don't know, so people that are truly kind of a cold buyer that you're working with, have they been more successful once you've met them or prior to meeting them?
Once you meet them.
Okay. This was my goal. That was my goal. Get them to come into the office. I'm not suggesting that I have never met anybody out at a house before, show them the property. I'm not suggesting that I've done this right every single time. I'm not suggesting that every single person will get there. But this was my goal. I know that if I got them to come in the office before I sent them to a lender, before I met them at a house, before I did anything, if I got them to come into the office and sit down with me and treat it like a true appointment, I was able to get the buyer broker signed right there after we were done. And it wasn't a buyer broker that they had no idea that they were working with, and they were only seeing this one house, that now they're locked in for it. I mean, I heard it all. You get them to sign something, it's now a year-long buyer broker agreement. They can't breathe, they claim that you're terrible, you haven't done anything. No, we're sitting across the table and we're having a true conversation. I will tell them on the phone, the best part about this when we come in, we're also going to have a lender with you to get you pre-qualified so that we take care of that. So now I've got the lending aspect of it is lined up as well. So usually what I'll have them come in, they'll meet with me, and then I can take them right down to the lender, kill two birds with one stone. But now when we come in, because they're calling on a home, they're calling, like everybody else, they talk to so many different agents that are out there, and every one of them are typically going to just meet them at the property to, hey, you know what, I'm going to have you sign this buyer broker on this one property at least. It sounds like the agent is focused on their best interest and not the client, right? So if you can, when you're setting up the appointment, if you can make it feel about them, and they come into the office, they are, I don't know what the percentage is, but I can tell you for me, the buyers that remained with me when that happened, off the chart, 80 to 90% of the time, is they remained with me, and it was, it wasn't a concern they were going to go look for somebody else, because we were now clear on what was happening. If this didn't happen for me, the odds of working with that buyer fell off drastically. So those were my two goals. That's what I visualized when I prospected. I want to set an appointment, but I wanted to be a qualified appointment, working with the seller. And the buyer, my qualified, did you get there okay? You know, he's visualizing, he's planning ahead, he knows exactly where he's going. That was timely. Thank you.
Right?
That was awesome. A lot of my pre-qual with the buyer occurred when they were across the table from me. So those are very simple in what was being done, but that was, if I was visualizing, if I was setting my goal in place, those two simple things that happen. Guys, we have tons. I hear it often, I don't know what to say, I don't know how to say it. We've got so much information that is available to you. If Michael Phelps would have jumped in the water and he would not have been prepared for what might happen that he didn't want to have happen, he would not have won that race. If mentally, if he had not prepared for the outcome, if he wasn't truly thinking about every single stroke, what he had to do, if we aren't prepared and know what the objections are before we're on the phone. And I'm not suggesting that you have to have it all perfect before you can get on the phone. This is a building process. This is a learning process. Michael didn't win. He's got 28 medals, 23 of them gold. He didn't win those when he was age 11 and just started swimming. That took years for him to accomplish that. But it all started in an area where he had to visualize, had to focus on something to be able to achieve what else he's going to be doing. So, powerful. Take those. They'll be great. Any questions?
Just a comment, Michael Phelps, I can't remember if I read it or listened to it, was always the first one in the water and the last one to leave.
On his practicing. He worked hours.
Yeah, hours to make it happen, to get to that level.
He mentioned, and I'm sure several of you guys have heard a lot of those. When his first Olympics was in 2000, I don't think he won a single medal on any of those. From the 5 Olympics that he was basically in, which one appeared to be the most enjoyable, comforting, fun? Any ideas?
The last one.
The last
The last one. Why?
He wasn't gonna go.
Actually, wasn't going to go to the last 2.
I think it was his biggest mountain to climb. I really do. I mean, it's, you know, looking towards the end of his career and deciding that, you know, is there enough in me to really do this? So it was more than just, you know, winning. It was a mental mountain he had to climb also in order to get, you know, back to where he could be the best of his game, top of the world, best.
Okay, I'm sure there's a lot of that. There's no doubt about it. He had a goal that it was, I think 40 world records or whatever it was that he achieved. But he's had that for a long period of time, and I'm, you know, not hitting that goal, which is the one thing that bothered him even after the Olympics. And he's like, maybe I'm not coming back so I can hit that goal. But that was one thing that was bothering him. So I'm sure it was definitely had something to do with that.
I think that one thing that's really hard to do is when you are now expected to win, and that expectations are really high, and to come up and now you've already proved that you've done this.
You're the
and
favorite.
Now keep that going and keep to the top.
As long as he did it.
As long as he did it,
It's unbelievable.
It was tremendous amount of stamina.
Sure.
And fortitude and discipline to keep that going the whole way.
We'll just end with this. Really, it's true. He echoed that. You know, they tried to ask which medal was more special, and he's like, of course, the first, because it's hard for him to say. He mentioned this one was important because of the obstacles he had to overcome. His first gold medal that he achieved, that was obviously extremely special. But if you look at, he talked about specifically the last Olympics that he was there. I'll just end with this briefly so you can visualize, get an idea of it. Because this isn't a sprint, it's a marathon. This isn't something that you're going to master and accomplish all in one day. It takes time. But the effort that you put into it you're gonna reap the benefits. His last Olympics that he was there, the first time he realized that he'd been so focused on achieving all of these individual goals, he never spoke to his teammates. He was never, ever given an opportunity to even receive any type of votes for being a captain. Can you imagine? Greatest, they talk about athlete, but certainly Olympian of all times, and the first time that he was ever received a vote to be one of the captains from the other athletes was in this last Olympics. He would never talk to anybody. He'd just be in the corner focusing on his own window, what he had to handle. And he said when he finally kind of let go of being, he didn't use the word self-centered, but that's That's what kind of came to my mind when he was talking about this. He opened himself up to helping others, being that person that the first-time Olympian can come and actually confide with, really be a teammate. And from that time, when he allowed that, he's like, look at me in the Olympics in this last one. I'm smiling all the time. He's talking, giving high fives, and he talked about certain times where one of the races in the last one, because of his schedule, he didn't have time to go back with other athletes. He had to go back into the cool down room and get prepared to go swim another event. But this last Olympics, which wasn't this one, this one was in 2008, but he said that was where it was complete for me. I realized that this is a great experience, opportunity. All the preparation I had before, of course, led up to this time, but it was that Olympics that he appreciated and enjoyed the most. The Olympics before, was it 2012, I think is what it was, he said, he goes, I got lazy. He goes, I didn't prepare. I was so done with the sport. He talked about an interview that he had for NBC where he had not been into the gym for 2 weeks prior to that. I mean, he didn't do anything to prepare. And definitely he was in somewhat decent shape, I'm sure, and also had great skill set. But when he did the interview, he said afterwards, talked to Bob Costas, who he was talking to, and of course they had no clue what was there, but he talked about his preparation up to that point, the hours that he spent in the gym, the hours that he was doing everything, the focus that he had led him to the point where he was just done. I can't do this anymore. And it was when he finally just looked back and said, there's a bigger perspective. He said he had went through a bunch of, we all know the different things that he went through in his personal life, but he had to go through a lot of those challenges to realize there's something else. He won all the races, won all the money, but he was not happy. It wasn't until he really kind of got broken down and realized there was more to what he was doing. And when he did that, he opened up. He became that kind of team player, and for the first time he starts getting nominated and became one of the captains in the Olympics. So just take with what he's done. Think about what you want to accomplish. Think about the things that you can do on the prospecting, what you need to do in regards of preparation. Objection handlers, focus on that. Today at 10 o'clock, we're going to actually go over several of the new forms that we have and two other things of dealing with commissions on your contracts and a couple of other things we're going to be talking about. So please come back, but if there's no other questions, we'll go ahead and end there. And smiles. A couple of you I don't know as well, but a couple of them I had to point out because there he goes.
I
So,